and welcome to video 22 of Flipped History. This video is about nationalisms, and there are four learning intentions. The first learning intention is to describe imperialism and how it was expressed in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The second learning intention is to describe Canadian nationalism and how it was expressed in the late 19th and early 20th century. And the third learning intention is to describe French-Canadian nationalism and how it was expressed. And the final learning intention is to compare and contrast the three different currents of thought. So the first current of thought we're going to look at today is imperialism. And the definition of imperialism is the imposition of political institutions like our parliamentary democracy, cultures and values on a territory under control of a particular country. So as you can see, this document here is showing the British Empire in the early 20th century. I think the postcard comes from about 1903. And the countries in red are the ones that are ruled by Britain. So how imperialism was expressed at this time was through a number of ways. The first one was through the Boer War. So if we just kind of zoom in here on Africa, this area here in red at the bottom is South Africa. And the British were at war with the Boers, who were descendants of Dutch immigrants. And Canada sent a contingent to South Africa to fight. There's these guys here. So you can see they're on horseback. Their hats are kind of like the Mounties. So this was the Canadian cavalry. They were hardened, battled troops who fought quite tenaciously during the war. Other examples of imperialism at the time can be seen here. This is Victoria Square in Montreal with the statue of the Queen, very predominant in the middle. And then other aspects are recruitment posters. So these are First World War recruiting posters. As you can see, the Empire is symbolically shown as the lion with her cubs. So you have Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, and this one here where it's talking about defending your flag. But notice the flag isn't the maple leaf, it's the British Union Jack. Second current of thought is Canadian nationalism, and this one here is really directly related to imperialism. Canadian nationalism at the time is defined by its link to Britain. So as you see, this envelope here is a Canadian envelope, and it basically is the Canadian flag, the red ensign, right, with the British Union Jack in the corner. As well, the Canadian Prime Minister at this time was Sir Wilfrid Laurier, and he gave a very famous speech in 1904 in Toronto where he said, quote, "For the next 75 years, nay, for the next 100 years, Canada shall be the star towards which all men who love progress and freedom shall come. But look abroad all over the continent, wherever the British flag floats, and let your motto be Canada first, Canada last, and Canada always." It was also shown in the creation of the Royal Canadian Navy. Now, Laurier, because he was a very skilled politician, he tried to bring in a compromise. The Conservatives, who were very much more imperialistic than the Liberals of Laurier, wanted to donate money to Britain so they could build huge battleships. Laurier said, no, we will create our own navy in Canada, but it'll be at the service of the British. This was opposed by many French Canadians. Now, French Canadian nationalism is the third current of thought that we're looking at in this video. And the person that personified this was Henri Bourassa. He was a former Liberal member of Parliament, and he was a newspaper writer and editor. And he really believed that in the protection of the French language, which is one of the characteristics of French Canadian nationalism. And he, while trying to remain loyal to Britain, wanted Canada to kind of set its own course. So he's shown this in a number of ways. The first was the Manitoba Schools Act. Now, when Manitoba was created, about half the population was French and half was English. But as we saw in a previous video, there was massive immigration to the west. And by the turn of the century, the population of French-speaking inhabitants of Manitoba was only about 15%. So the government of Manitoba wanted to get rid of French schools, and Bourassa stepped forward and said no, they had to protect French schooling in Manitoba. This quote here shows just really how he thought of Canada. He believed in the federation, that is the French side and the English side of Canada, as a country of two elements, separated by their language and their religion and the laws as well. The kind of third element here is when conscription was brought in. So during the First World War, there was, many men were killed fighting in France and in Belgium, and there was a need for more and more men. The propaganda at the time really tried to show this British connection, but in the end, what Canada needed was more men to fight. So when the recruits, stopped coming in because a lot of people realized that maybe going and dying in the trenches wasn't such a good idea, the government wanted to bring in mandatory military service. And Bourassa was one of the leaders who was against mandatory military service, which is also known as conscription. So these three currents of thought all interacted at the same time. You had imperialism, which is the very, very strong link to Britain, and people were willing to do whatever the British wanted to do. There was English-Canadian nationalism, which was linked to Britain, but also wanted Canada to have its own course. And then there was French-Canadian nationalism, which was dominated by the protection of the French language, the Catholic religion, but also this idea that Canada was a separate country from Britain as well. All right, thank you for watching. After you're done your notes, please consider the following essential question. How did the currents of thought challenge each other at this period of time?